Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Discourse of the Three Kingdoms with me, Steve, and Jude. I say special because today we're doing something a bit different. Our guest is Baptiste, who has recently published a novel about the Three Kingdoms, and today we're going to be interviewing him. The novel is called Yellow Sky Revolt and is set largely during the Yellow Turban period, the focus of our previous episode. Welcome to the show, Baptiste. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me on your podcast. I think we had a bunch of very nice conversations since the release of my book. You've been very kind in your reviews and everything. So, as you mentioned, my name is Baptiste Pinson Wu. Altogether, that would be my pen name, to be exact. And I'm the writer of Yellow Sky Revolt. I'm a big fan of the Three Kingdoms in general, and decided to write a whole series on the topic. I think it was about time someone did a new series that is set all over the Three Kingdoms. As you guys can hear, I'm from France, more specifically from Normandy. But just to reassure everyone, editors are looking at my books, so the English is not too broken, I think.
I saw no issues with your English. As a huge fan of historical fiction novels, this is something I've been waiting for a long time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anyone who's a fan of the Three Kingdoms and has enjoyed novels by people like Bernard Cornwell or Simon Scarrow will love this. Both Jude and I have posted reviews of Yellow Sky Revolt on Tumblr and Jude on Twitter, so go check them out. This interview is going to relax our no spoiler about the era rule. So if you're wishing to avoid them, we suggest looking at Tory Talks. She is someone who's coming to Yellow Sky Revolt unfamiliar with the era. That will give you a good idea of how accessible it is for you, and she has further entertaining interviews with Baptiste that are less spoilery about the Three Kingdoms. But now, Jude, do you want to ask the first question?
Delighted to. I suppose the easy first question is, what got you into the Three Kingdoms?
I think it's like many people, it was video games that got me. The first time I heard about Three Kingdoms was through Dynasty Warriors 4, to be exact. I was in high school and had those friends from England coming over, those pen pals. I don't know what is the best term for them, but correspondents maybe. So they came to France to visit us, and me and my best friend just bought a PlayStation 2, and we were like, what kind of fun games could we buy to play with those guys from England? So we acquired Dynasty Warriors 4. We played it, and that was pretty fantastic, but the story didn't feel perfect. It didn't feel like tailored for a video game. And at the end of this, I think I was playing with Wei at first. The very first game I did was with Wei. And at the end, I think it says something like, in the credits, it says something like their tales of valor would later come to be known as the Romans of the Three Kingdoms. And I was like, holy hell, there's a book about this. That's an actual book to begin with. That's not a video game. So I ran to the local bookstore. There was Amazon didn't exist back then, right? That was 2004, and we didn't have many choices. Exactly, that was beautiful, right? For those bookstores. They didn't have the Romans of the Three Kingdoms in French.
It took me years to find it.
Yeah,
Literal
same.
Years.
Well, they ordered one for me. The book came, and that was actually a drawn version of the Three Kingdoms. That wasn't the Romans per se, right? That was actually very good. I was really excited, but I could see that wasn't the original piece, right? So I struggled a bit, found book one in French, and the translation was fantastic, to be honest. So yeah, that's how I got into Three Kingdoms, through Dynasty Warriors 4.
Okay, so you experienced the history and the Three Kingdoms engripped you. What then inspired you to write the style of novel that you've written, or who inspired you?
Well, as a writer, the writers who inspired me would be first Bernard Cornwell. This one is a very easy answer. Bernard Cornwell is the master of historical fiction. I love most of his books. I mean, at least all those I read. And yeah, he was a very big inspiration for me in terms of tone or development of characters. I think Uhtred of Bebbanburg is definitely in the top inspirations in terms of characters. I also very much like Robert Law. He's one of my favorite writers of historical fiction, and I love the dynamic between characters in his novels. I think everyone should read the Oath Sworn series, saga, sorry, not series. And the characters, the way they move is absolutely amazing. Lastly, there is a writer that I really appreciate. I talk to him from time to time. His name is Ron Peake. He's the writer of Marching with Caesar. And I also used his style a little bit to maybe perfect a bit the tone of my novel. It's going to be more obvious in book 2 than in book 1, but yeah, Ron Peake helped a lot.
So Bernard Cornwell is my favorite author of all time. And I think as I read through your novel, I could really see his influence there, particularly as you write in a first-person style that is similar to the Saxon Chronicles of the Last Kingdom for TV fans, and Durfil, the King Arthur series. But interestingly, you do deviate a little bit from them, from those characters. Bernard Cornwell always picks a fictional character, doesn't he, to look at history through that person's eyes, whereas you have gone for a historical figure, Liao Hua. Why did you make that choice?
Well, first, Liao Hua is a bit of both, right? He's both kind of fictional and obviously real at the same time. In big part, thanks to Luo Guanzhong, who wrote the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, we have this idea that Liao Hua was originally a Yellow Turban, which he most likely wasn't. But because of this legendary, I would say, fictionist beginning, it allowed me to play a bit with the character. And I really wanted to start with the Yellow Turbans. So he was kind of perfect in this sense. And he's not big enough, even historically speaking, that I would anger specialists of this time period. Now, the last good reason for using, let's say, semi-fictionist character, but at the same time well-known character, is that it allowed me to build a sense of anticipation. For example, people who know Three Kingdoms, when they see that I introduced Sima Yi at 6 years old, Sima Yi, they will pick, oh, right, Sima Yi and Liao Hua, they have history much later. So because of that, they know where this is going. And I think it builds a kind of, not cliffhanger, but, a nice suspense there. Yeah.
Does writing a tale about that where you know that it's going to end badly for Liao Hua and those he served, does that make you feel sad, or sort of is that something you like writing about, sort of from a tragic perspective?
Well, it's probably not very nice, but I quite like it, to be honest. No, I don't really feel bad for them. Those guys, they had their shot. The Shu Han, they could have done something else probably. Maybe it makes me feel bad for Liao Hua personally, because I like him as a character and because of his position in his realm or state. But no, I don't feel very bad. I don't feel bad about this. And now the thing is, I will not let it end as simply as we know. Like, I think Liao Hua's biography will say something like he died on the way to Luoyang. I was like, that's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen like this. The end of his story will be different, as well as many other characters. I keep a lot of surprise for the end of the story that will divert from what we may know already.
That sounds intriguing.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, that wouldn't be funny, right? And I think this is the big difference. I hope it is the big difference with what we said earlier about Bernard Cornwell's main characters, who tend to tell the story just for the sake of telling the story. Liao Hua, so in my story, Liao Hua is the narrator, and he's going back over his life. And but as he goes over his life, he still acts in the background. So there is a story happening in the story. It's not there in the book 1 because I didn't want to make it too complicated for newcomers to the Three Kingdoms. But there is a story happening in the background.
Interesting. So how do you get that balance between Liao Hua having his own story, but also telling the story of the Three Kingdoms as a whole?
That was quite tough. I think it is quite tough, and I hope I'm not going too strong on either side. A character who saw everything, that wouldn't be believable, especially when you put him in an empire the size of China. So it wouldn't be easily believable. But at the same time, if he didn't see enough, that would be a bit boring. There would be too many. This is what happened there while I was doing this, and that doesn't make for a great story. Now the thing is, at first, at the beginning of Yellow Sky Revolt, Liao Hua, he's a child. He's like 7 years old. So he's kind of flying wherever the wind takes him. Yeah, and he gets a role despite himself. It's a bit of a, all right, you go stand there, you watch this. What do you think about this guy? Nothing happens because of him. Everything happens to him. As he grows, he starts to take more responsibility and to decide what he's going to do. And then everything that happens around him is kind of his fault. So this is how I try to keep the balance. And in order to make him more central in the time of in his life, I will move him away from being just a soldier or just a leader of soldier. He will learn a lot more than just the soldier's life.
Yeah, I did pick that up in part 2. That sort of, it was more than just it was more than just military training he was getting. I was wondering where that was going to go.
Yeah, and this goes much further in book 2. Towards the end of book 2, we learn really what kind of character he will become, what kind of asset he will become to his lord.
Linking with that, how do you decide what Liao Hua knows, what he hears, but in a way that differs from history because he's miles away from events, and what he simply cannot possibly know? So,
well, at first it's quite, at the beginning of the story, it's quite easy. He's just a child, plus he's a peasant child, right? He's from the countryside of Jing province, and he doesn't know much. He knows what he can hear from his community, the people around him, what they say. So of course they will complain a lot about the greed, the corruption, this kind of thing. So he knows about all of this. He knows why the Yellow Turbans started. But that's it. Then as he grows and travels and meets new people, new kinds of people, he will discover different points of views, and he will learn other side of his culture. And that's really the system I use for readers who don't know about China, to discover China as well through the eyes of a kid who himself is not completely aware of what happens around him. So sometimes we see this process. They bring like a European character in like a Asian setting, and in order to explain, oh wow, this culture is amazing. I can't stand this, so I prefer to use a peasant boy.
That's helpful. So we learn as that character learns.
Exactly, we learn as the character learns, but also he decides what is the truth according to him, because at first he's a peasant, then he will meet more people. He realizes maybe farmers, peasantry, they are not always right. But because he has this peasant background, he will also realize scholars or rich people can be very wrong as well, from a more simple character's point of view.
Wrong. What sorcery is this?
Exactly. So now he decides. Basically, he decides on his own truth. What is the truth according to Liao Hua? Now, the very funny part of this is to make old Liao Hua, the narrator, comment on what he knew or didn't know as a kid. And it allows to have some funny comments like, oh, back then, I thought soldiers were like this, while in reality, they keep grumbling and stuff like this.
Yeah, I thought you did a very good job in balancing sort of the self-awareness of the narrator versus the what the child naturally did not know, but of being a child, thought he knew everything at that point in his life.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad it worked for you guys. Yeah.
So we've been discussing what Liao Hua knows. I guess the next question is, how did you know that? As in, what research did you have to do to allow you to write the novel?
Well, first, I believe after discussing with you two and with some other members of the Three Kingdoms community that I know much less than than most of you.
That's very
But
kind.
I
but
fake it. I just fake it, and no one has noticed yet.
in other interviews I would fake it as well, maybe, but not with you two. You would see through me. Now, when I decided that it was time to write this novel, so first, the idea of this novel came maybe 10 years ago. I started about 10 years ago to want to write this, but back then I was thinking, I'm not good enough as a writer. I want to have more experience as a writer. I wrote 7 books before Yellow Sky Revolt, though this is the first that I publish. But then I was like, you know what? I want 2022 to be the year I publish my first book, and it has to be about Three Kingdoms. That's my blue ocean, as we say in marketing. So I started to do heavy research, and I wanted to read something that was really wide. I wanted to learn more about the whole Han Dynasty, not just the Three Kingdoms, not just the Jianan period, but everything that happened 200 years before, 400 years before. So I went to Rafe de Crespigny's Fire over Luoyang, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
He's the true hero of the Three Kingdoms.
He's one of the 2 modern heroes of the Three Kingdoms, yes, according to me. And so I combed through this book, Fire over Luoyang. Then I read Imperial Warlord, which focuses on Cao Cao. And I read, again, Generals of the South, which I did read about 10 years ago. So I really did a thorough reading, stopping, taking like screenshots whenever there was some information that I really needed to keep. And as I read those 2, I used all the footnotes, the biography at the end, to find more contents, to find more books, more research on the topic of Three Kingdoms, Han Dynasty, and everything around it. And after some time, you end up finding the same names, the same titles, and you realize, all right, I think I know enough to write a believable book, like something that people will get into. Now, the thing is, I think that's Bernard Cornwell who said actually that you need to use 10% of what you learn during your research in your book. Like you need to know everything, but you need to leave 90% of what you know on the side so that it doesn't become a history manual. So if with only 10% of my knowledge on the Three Kingdoms, it might have been a bit limited. So I maybe tried to put a bit more. And I couldn't always find what I wanted, either in French or in English. So I tried a bit in Chinese and Japanese, but those 2 languages, I really don't master them enough to read this kind of paper. So I asked some friends, some Chinese friends, to help me find some more information, and they've been super helpful. I had a nice group of maybe 10 people helping me whenever I had a question. Even then, couldn't always find the answer.
Unfortunately, with history, sometimes there is no knowable answer because they didn't bother to record it. They didn't think, what would future podcasters want to know?
Absolutely. And some points, especially in Chinese culture, maybe they didn't see the reason why they should keep it recorded. Like I still don't have many informations regarding the life of peasants, the life of simple soldiers, or slavery, something that was not overly used in China compared to Rome, for example, but still would have been nice to know more about this. Yeah.
And I found frustrating when researching for novels myself is the fact that they didn't seem to care about recording details of military campaigns, care about the implications of the campaigns themselves,
Yes.
but the details of the battles are very rarely recorded, which can be a tad frustrating.
It is like, and they did record when there was a big mistake or a big success. And through those information, we know more about the life of soldiers, of what was the daily life on campaign and stuff like this. But yeah, it's quite limited.
Going on to the Three Kingdoms themselves, you often have, shall we say, history, novel, modern culture. How do you balance all those competing narratives and conflicts where they just don't always agree with each other to make a cohesive tale?
Well, most of the time I choose whichever helps the story remain entertaining. I would really love to write a series that is 100% on the history side. But history is not always the most interesting side of the story itself. It's quite sad for some characters like Sun Jian. They really lost a lot in the transition from history to legend to story. But you know, that's how it is. And of course, sometimes I veer from both. Sometimes I don't like either the history or the story, and I write something else. Like at the moment, I'm writing the plot of the novella that will follow book 3. So I finished book 3 about 2-3 weeks ago, and now I'm working on the plot for a novella that will close this first cycle of the series. And I really created my own version of a fictitious story. So there is this story that that is quite loved, but I don't like it. So because it's not the real story to begin with, I decided to write it my own way. But no, I just choose whichever I feel is believable and entertaining.
Interesting. So you pick whichever one you think is more interesting. Are there any ways that the novel changes history that you really love? And are there any that really, really annoy you?
In the main Romance of the Three Kingdoms or in my novel?
Sorry, in Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
All right. In the romance, I really have a love and hate relationship with the simplification of characters. Cao Cao is always a villain. Liu Bei is always benevolent almost until the end. It really makes this story quite easy to appreciate, but it's probably very, very wrong, especially when it comes to Liu Bei. I also don't like how intangible the characters are. Now, in reality, people change. You know, we all have bad days or bad months, even maybe.
Bad
We grow
years,
older. Yeah, bad years
bad
sometimes.
decades.
And yeah, the characters should change. You know, like in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, they show up from the moment they show up to the moment they leave. They don't really change much. Like Guan Yu show up, he has a massive beard while he's in his early 20s. Same for Zhang Fei. You know, I don't buy it. It doesn't make sense. So yeah,
Everyone sort of starts with being really, really good at what they do. So,
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. The Guan Yu is like already this boss. You know, he's like an unbeatable guy. As we will see, it's not always true in my novel. Yeah.
There's very little room for character growth in romance, is there? I guess that's because there's so many characters that they probably couldn't do that.
Well, yeah, there's that, and I think also characters are not really people in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. They are symbols. You know, they are more like this guy represents the perfect Confucian general. This guy represents the over villainous chancellor. You know, and because they represent symbol rather than people per se, maybe sometimes they don't change. You know, they don't need to.
Yeah, what the romance does really well is sort of like it takes the traits it establishes from the start
Mm.
and turns it into why they fail, or sort of
Yeah.
the great
Mm.
character arcs, but they are who they are from the start.
Mm.
One who's always a bit arrogant, not
Yeah.
rather than someone who grows into it. Cao Cao from the start, you kind of see him running around, shaping the world around him. There's no Cao Cao almost gets killed in a mutiny. Cao Cao makes a massive, massive clangor again and again.
Mm.
It just, that everyone pick Xin Chuan, he picks up the reins of rulership and is just really good at it right from the off. There's none of us can do that as a human being. That's a
Yeah,
phenomenal.
they don't make mistakes, and when they do, somehow it was like either on purpose or it worked well. Like Cao Cao will say, "Oh, I put those guys on the fatal ground. I did it on purpose so that they would fight with all their valor." And it's like, yeah, you almost got your ass kicked, you know. So let's call it as it is.
The
So
GK,
yeah.
the dynasty-wise GK Leon retreat line. This was all part of my plan as he fight this army.
I think in this sense, Zhuge Liang is probably going to be the biggest surprise in my series because I cannot stand how perfect he is. in many media adaptations. He was probably the best, right? There is no argument there. It's just no one is that good. So yeah, for the romance, I would say that's what I both like and don't like. Now, in my novel, I introduced this character, Qiao Xuan, who in history is one of the people who made Cao Cao famous to begin with by claiming that he was the hero of chaos. That he's not the one who said that line. He said another one, but there were like two characters who judged Cao Cao as a young man. I put them together to become Qiao Xuan. He's the part of the story of the novel that I wish maybe I didn't include. I kind of shot myself in the foot with him in the long run. So yeah, that would be the part of my story that I'm not the most fond of. I just wanted to include a bit of mysticism maybe into Liao Hua's life. Now on the loving side, I'm really proud about the parts, I should say, where I reestablished a bit of authenticity, especially when the narrator, old Liao Hua, tells the scribe, so Chen Shou, how things really happen. So he is destroying Chen Shou's romanticized version of the past events. He does that a lot, and I absolutely love it when it's like when they discuss like the illustrious lords from back then, the imperial edict, this kind of things. That's my a bit how do we say this in English? Guilty pleasure as a writer.
I don't think you need to feel guilty about that pleasure.
You should feel guilty about all pleasure.
Good one. But yeah, no, this one I'm sometimes I'm wondering if I go too far. Like, maybe a bit of romanticism is fine too, but yeah, no, let's destroy this.
How do you balance Easter eggs from history or the novel, but also accessibility to those who are new to the era?
Well, I really love Easter eggs. That's the part that I enjoy the most, maybe even more than destroying Shen Shou's romanticized version of the Three Kingdoms. I love putting Easter eggs and see who will pick them. So I try to keep them concise, not jarring, and really to the point. If they are too long, if they take too much time, and people who don't know Three Kingdoms won't really appreciate this. Now, one of my big ambitions with this series is to get people to discover the Three Kingdoms. I hope people who know Three Kingdoms are going to love it, but I hope even more than people who don't know Three Kingdoms are going to love it and discover Three Kingdoms. And if those people who discover Three Kingdoms through my series end up researching or finding more information about it and then decide to go back to my novel to catch those Easter eggs, I will really consider myself victorious. Now, I'm guessing if anyone got them all in Yellow Sky Revolt, it must be the two of you. So is there any that you particularly liked? Can you remember any particular Easter egg?
I know this wasn't an Easter egg, but something I did enjoy is how you turned Jin being from Butcher's family into sort of, oh, he must be a violent butcher. Sort of like it become part of his reputation, just simply that little detail. I thought, oh, that was quite nice too. I loved what you did with the turban magic, as it were, which I think we're going to come on to. I'll be honest, I was cheering when you brought in Brokai and sort of how he was like their champion, their big turban figure, sort of like someone who's not in the novel at all, but so the Song Brothers could be spread about. But because he's like one of their best historical commanders, you managed to really give him a bit of an impact while being off screen as well. I really like that.
I cheered out loud when that was mentioned because I love him.
So
I scared my dog at that point in time. I think the other Easter egg that I thought was so clever was the introduction of Sima Yi and his relationship with Liao Hua. Because those of us who know the novel knows that there's an interesting dynamic between the two of them a long way down the line. And I just thought planting those seeds so early was really clever.
Yeah, I think we will definitely go over the the idea of secondary characters a bit later in our conversation, if I'm correct. But yeah, like Sima Yi was, I had to put him there, even though he's not going to show up now for a while. Anyone who knows the history of Three Kingdoms knows that's way too early for Sima Yi. But yeah, he had to be there and to create something special for the later books. Now, as for Botsai, so from the Yellow Turbans, I don't know why I wanted to have this one guy that is like the hero. Basically, everyone is like, "Oh my God, this is our champion," but we never really see him. And it's like, because when a champion loses, everyone loses hope, right? So, and this guy, he managed something quite miraculous. If you think about it, Botsai and his group, they managed to get Runan. So this part of the empire, which was very rich. That's a part of the Great Han Empire that was quite successful. That wasn't the backward, that wasn't a random place, right? And they still managed to run this place over. So yeah, quite happy about him too.
Excellent. Is there anything that you're really looking forward to writing about? Or maybe I should rephrase that. What are you really looking forward to? And what are you sad that you're not going to be able to cover?
Well, the obvious answer is battles. Some battles I'm so looking forward to write them. The one that I feel I will love the most is a Changban battle. So when Liu Bei has to run away, because it's going to be messy. I love writing messy battles. I just wrote a few weeks ago the Battle of Wan, when Cao Cao and got. That's not his most glorious tale. And it's such a messy battle, and I loved writing it. It was quite intense. Changban will be even better, I believe. There will be a lot to unpack. So battles, I look forward to write some battles. And on the character side, I really look forward to introduce Zhuge Liang and Ma Chao as well. Those would be the two. Now, please don't imagine that I want to introduce them because I like them. This is not what I'm saying. I actually have to warn that many characters are going to be both the same and quite different from their usual depictions. So if you want an example, think about the character Lancelot from Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles. He's very, very different from what we expect of Lancelot. I will do this with several characters in my novel. That's for the history side. Now, personally, for this series, I'm really impatient to bring Liao Hua's love interest to the front stage. So I know this is, what, as a writer, this was surprising to me, but the part that I love to write the most in Yellow Sky Revolt is how we fell in love the first time. And this part surprised me, and I absolutely adored this moment. And I can't wait to bring more of that. Yeah, I did. I'm already done with books 3, by the way. So I did introduce some of it already, and I quite like it.
I think one of the questions we decided not to ask, but I think Three Kingdoms writers want to know is, how do we steal your writing essence?
Yeah, how do you write so much?
So the thing is, I don't really know myself. I have no clue. I don't feel like I'm trying really hard to write much or fast or whatever. When I write, I'm basically typing what I read in my head. So I'm typing almost as fast as I would read. The thing is, I'm a big plotter, so I plot everything quite in detail. So I never really stumble upon a part of my story that I don't really know what's going to happen next. So usually it goes quite smoothly from the moment I start the first draft to the moment I finish the first draft. There's not a lot of stops. I actually had a bit of a struggle with the book 3 when writing the Battle of Yan Ford. Took me like 2 or 3 days to understand what I was going to do with it. But usually, it goes quite fast. I'm also quite lucky. I can write no matter what the situation. So if it's quiet at home, it's perfect. If I go to a coffee shop, I can write just as well. If my kids are running around me, I can still write, and I can stop and restart right away. I don't need anymore to go through like a let's listen to 5 minutes of music and drink my tea or whatever, as I used to do before. Now I can like go back to it, get back to it right away. And as I live in a very small, regular Tokyo apartment, you can imagine my kids are always around me. So I'm quite lucky, yeah, in that sense, yeah.
What about, because you can't write 100 years civil war in 10 books and have absolutely everything in it, what is it that you regret that you're probably going to have to cut or not be able to focus on?
Well, because it's a first-person story, I will have to focus on Liao Hua, and depending on where Liao Hua is, I will have to leave some stuffs unwritten, which is quite sad. Specifically, I would have loved to write about Cao Cao's conquest of the north. So after he kicks Yuan Shao back over the Yellow River, and how he manages to deal with the Yuan Shao's sons, the Wu Huan tribes, and all of this. I won't be able to do this, which is sad. I hope to do it in bonus chapters, but not in the novels.
I know Guandu's like his most famous campaign, but it's arguably his march north against the Wuhan, which is both
yes,
his riskiest and his most brilliant campaign.
It is like so much happened that is usually not described in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, in media adaptations and all of this. I would have loved to do this, but it just doesn't fit in the plot. Now with my newsletters, I still intend to write a bit about this, but it's not going to be as big as I would have liked it. Second one, the one I'm really hesitating right now in the terms of plotting, outlining, is the conquest of Shu by Liu Bei. So when he goes to take over Yi province, because technically Liao Hua should be in Jing with Guan Yu, but I so want him to be there. I will probably find a way for Liao Hua to be in Yi province in Shu. Yeah. So how about you guys? Is there anything that you really look forward to? Characters, battles, events, whatever.
So Sun Ce is my favorite figure from the period. So I think I'm excited to see how you present him. But if you turn him into a Lancelot, we're not having you back on the show.
All right, don't read books through them.
Or is it to reward the author?
So, all right, I don't want to spoil Sun Ce, but I already introduced him. Now, all right, how to explain this without saying too much? With the newsletters, there will be bonus chapters, as we will discuss, I guess. And with those newsletters, with those bonus chapters, I will dive into different stories, and I really hope to give more space for the Sun family, the Sun clan. Now, because Sun Ce, he doesn't really have anything to do with Liao Hua. We shouldn't see him much in the main series, but I really want to include him as well in this wider series that is the Three Kingdoms Chronicles. Now, I think I mentioned to you once, but the name of my self-publishing press, so which I had to create to self-publish my book, is Little Conqueror Press. So obviously, I'm a big fan of Sun Ce as well. Just to reassure you, all right?
That's a relief.
For me, what I'm looking forward to is it's somewhere sort of the journey from sort of former turban and sort of a guy who's admired Cao Cao to someone who's going to be serving, as it were, the arch rival, sort of the exact opposite.
Yeah, basically, what is going to be the journey for Liao Hua to go from Cao Cao to serving Guan Yu and trying to basically serve the opposite of Cao Cao. This is actually the whole point of the first cycle. So the first cycle of my series is book 1, 2, 3 plus a novella. Is really to explain why Liao Hua went from serving Cao Cao to joining Guan Yu, who is like his enemy. So sorry if you haven't read the book, you just got spoiled big time. So this is really why he chose to go from this lord that he really adores, worships even in the first book, to kind of going the other way. And this is how this story of Liao Hua changing his personality is also a way to describe the evolution of Cao Cao's personality. So at first he was a person worthy of Liao Hua's respect. It changed. It changes as it goes here.
When I know stories about Liu Ha, so obviously my sort of who am I going to be interested in? It's going to be based around the Shu Han figures that he's going to meet. That it's because you kind of get like history figures, novel figures. I'm very interested to see how you end up portraying a lot of these figures.
I mean, the figure that transcends both the Sun Clan and Liu Bei's faction is Lady Sun.
Lady Sun,
So I'm so interested to see how you're going to portray her.
Yeah, it's gonna be quite fun. Yeah. I have good plans for Sun Shangxiang. Yeah. I won't say more about her. I don't want to spoil too much.
Last question for the Three Kingdoms bit. How do you keep things concise given the sheer scale of the era?
Well,
Assuming you're not doing 120 chapters like the novel does.
Well, in the end, it's going to be more than 120 chapters because it's 10 books, right? But no, I see your point. So having a first-person point of view helps to keep things concise. He just can't be everywhere, so I have to use shortcuts sometimes. Like he's telling what happened to the scribe rather than narrating it, and it goes a bit faster this way. And I also removed a lot of small-scale events, like non-essential details, and sadly also had to remove some redundant characters. Now, for example, in book 2, we get to experience the Battle of Yan Province. So after Lü Bu and Chen Gong took over Yan Province from Cao Cao. Now, in reality, it was quite messy. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of small skirmishes, and so on. Now, in the novel, I didn't want to go through all of them, so I really streamlined a lot of it. Didn't need to go through all of this to make it interesting, I think.
Excellent.
One question. Is Fat Ling really the true hero of the Three Kingdoms? It is a disgrace he's not mentioned in the history books. I'm leaving history.
All right. I don't know why, but like I really didn't expect Fat Ling to be so appreciated. But like literally everyone who contacted me to say that they enjoyed the book told me like Fat Ling was really cool. I was like, all right, that's nice. Yeah, he's
we'll really know you've made it as a success when Koei put him into the next installment of Dynasty Warriors.
Exactly. You know what? This is what the success would be for them to put Liao Hua in the next roster of characters. But if they do put Fat Ling, oh my God, I'm so happy. That's it. My career is done. I did everything I had to. But no, Fat Ling is interesting. And yeah, he's a bit of an unspoken hero. But there will be more like him. Fairly lovable characters on the side, yeah.
What I liked was you don't really expect much from him at the start, but he just grows into it. If you know what I mean. I mean, he's called Fat Ling.
There's not much room for growth in terms of size, is there? So
no, because he's actually very thin, right? He's his nickname is a bit of a joke. Fat Ling is really thin. He's slender, right? He's quite tall and thin, but everyone calls him Fat Ling. I think he himself too, he was surprised. He's like he was supposed to be a bit of a wobbly character, and he ends up being quite solid. So that was quite interesting, yeah.
Okay, so you start your series with the Yellow Turbans. What are your thoughts on them as a group?
The thing is, I really had to start with the Yellow Turbans because I wanted to start this series from the common folks' point of view. Like Three Kingdoms is always about those lords, those warlords, those scholars who know and they manage everything and from their palaces and everything. I wanted to start from the bottom, and obviously the Yellow Turbans was the way to do so. Now there was a very interesting idea brought into from an anime I watched. I think that was Soten Koro, and in this anime, Cao Cao says that if they hadn't given weapons to the Yellow Turbans, the creed of the Great Peace would have lived for thousands of years. It would have become a massive religion, a massive side of Taoism. And I think this is very true. This is a group if they hadn't rebelled the way they did, maybe they would have become something else. You know, it would have become something even bigger. I assume they are really interesting. I was happy, and they don't stay very long, so I wanted to start with with those guys. Yeah.
With the turbans, I suppose when you're trying to do a realistic version of the era, one of the problems is their reputation is magic and their healing. How do you deal with that as a writer?
So I wanted to stay away from magic. As a historical fiction writer, I don't like magic that much. But of course, you know, it was acknowledged, and I had to keep it acknowledged and realistic to the character, especially for a kid, right? At first, he believes in those things. So it was a bit of a challenge. So like I said, there is no magic in my novels, but it doesn't mean there is nothing real about magic. It's just magic is something that we don't really understand usually. We can't put a scientific reason behind it, maybe. I don't know. Now, I come from a part of France where we still have healers and what we call gifted people, right? So maybe the idea was, I was a bit more open to those things. But in Yellow Sky Revolt, reality is really harsh and quite disenchanting. So yeah, I stayed away, and I will stay away from any magic in this series. There won't be any wind appearing from an altar or this kind of things.
The Dynasty Warriors movie opening with zombies.
I stopped there. I watched 5 minutes of that movie, and they came back as zombies. I was like, "Yep, stop, not for me."
Shockingly, I've not watched it yet. It is on my to-watch list.
Oh yeah, it has to stay there.
It's one of those that you'll either enjoy it for the nods, and I will give it credit, it does better with the other characters than the games actually do, but it is still a good movie.
No, I mean, some things belong to video games. They look fine in video games. You shouldn't put them in movies. I mean, that's my opinion. Some people love that movie, so I respect
I haven't
that.
met any yet. I'll be honest. I've not yet heard a positive review of it.
If you on the Facebook group you and I first talked,
Yes.
which is about Dynasty Warriors fans, a bunch of people actually really loved it. From
I'll be honest, I only joined that group to talk to you because someone else who was in that group told me about your novel and that you were a member of that group.
Brilliant. No, I mean, it's full of very cool people, people who love Three Kingdoms as well, though mostly from the video game point of view, and I really enjoy some of the conversation I have there. But when it comes to that movie, nah, it's not for me.
I'm enjoying the group now I'm there, just to be clear.
Personally, going into the Turbans, I'm not the biggest fan of the Turbans you'll ever see. I find it difficult with the way they did historically heal people. So that always puts me at a dislike. And I also find people like, because there's so little information out there about them, that people kind of attach their own beliefs onto them really. So I was actually really pleasantly surprised at how you did the turban magic, and how the turbans it actually gave a really human feel to what they were trying to do while keeping it realistic with a bit of tragedy. It actually made me slightly more pro-turban.
That's a very that's a very good compliment. I think with the turbans, what I wanted to avoid was to make Zhang Jue, so the founder, and his brothers, it would have been very easy to turn them into a bit of villains, you know, like a crook or whatever. And I didn't want to go that way. I wanted them to make like people who actually wanted to do good, and probably got caught into their own momentum a little bit. But yeah, I didn't want to make it either too good or too bad, you know.
Yeah, I definitely think you got the balance there.
Oh, that's cool. That's really good. Except for Zhang Mansheng. This guy, this guy he didn't, and came out of my novel grander.
Sometimes that has to happen. Sometimes there has to be a full character, like Lancelot.
Exactly.
So Jude just mentioned that his issue with the Yellow Turbans is often that people put their own beliefs onto them.
Mm.
The reason they're able to do that is because of the lack of information about the Yellow Turbans. Most of what we've got about them is written by their opponents. So how did you find writing about them considering that?
That was actually quite of a chance in a way to that there isn't so much information. They are very small, right? In terms of historically speaking, they lasted for a few years if you consider the founding of the Way of the Great Peace by Zheng Jue to the end of the rebellion. It's not so long. It's so I could play with them as I wanted. I don't think I will anger specialists basically of this group. So I could do pretty much what I wanted while staying within the realm of what I knew, what we know of the Yellow Turbans. I quite like it. Now, this lack of information, while it was good for the Yellow Turban, that was a big hindrance when it comes to the life of peasants or like simple soldiers and stuff like this. So for those guys, I had to patch the gaps with what we know from other regions and or maybe what we know from previous dynasty or next dynasties and so on. So I had to fill some gap, and I had to create my own theories. In book 2, for example, I go into military training a lot. We don't know much about this. It's a lot of me guessing what could have been military training back then.
I would say in book 1, because obviously I've not read book 2 with it not being out yet, right? I think one of the things you do really well is like you capture a sense of authenticity about the culture, about the sort of. I could not find anything jarring or where anything goes, where it's sort of, oh, this is a big mistake, or this wasn't invented for another 1,000 years. I like, right? But particularly given sort of having to mold everything together, like sort of, if you give Guan Yu a historical weapon, you will lose the readership within 5 minutes. But
exactly. Some details they couldn't stay historical per se, like those weapons, right? We know Guan Yu with his halberd, we know it didn't happen. He probably didn't have this weapon, but some details have to they have to be not historical, but the rest I try to keep it as believable as possible, as authentic as possible. Like I said, I had some people helping me a lot, some people from China helping me a lot, and some of them they were like, oh, in this scene you say the guy is eating pork cooked in oil. Actually, they didn't cook pork back like this back then, and couldn't prove me that they didn't. So I left it there. I was like, well, they probably did. We just don't have a proof that they did or didn't. So that's another conversation. Some people say, yeah, they didn't eat pork back then. I was like, yes, they did. But yeah, try to keep it authentic. And it helps that I don't do much descriptions of buildings and clothes and all of this. This is something that I don't like. I don't like doing as a writer. I don't like reading as a reader. So I'm not describing much about the clothes and the architecture. So, and that is good because I would have probably been very wrong on this side.
After the Turban War, which surprisingly does not take up the entire 10 books, so we go into what I like to call the Cao Cao chapters. I always said Cao Cao there. Thank you, Dynasty Warriors, for all that. So we go into, but also part of the Liao Hua growing up. Since we get to know Cao Cao a lot, and we get introductions to Sun Jian and Liu Bei, what are your feelings about the 3 leaders, both as a person, as a Three Kingdoms fan, but also as an author? You got to write about them.
Well, the one I prefer among the 3 is Cao Cao. As a writer and as a person, I really liked Cao Cao.
Shocking.
No, also among the 3, at the basics of at the beginning of the story, he's definitely the most interesting. Sun Jian is very interesting, but because of what happens to him, it's difficult to keep him to make him the central character, right? So that's why I made Liao Hua join Cao Cao, and everyone who hasn't read the book must be like, "What? Liao Hua is joining Cao Cao?" I promise it makes sense in my book, and the point is to bring. Yeah. Oh, good.
It does make
That's
sense.
reassuring.
Yeah.
And the point is to really introduce this very central character from the Three Kingdoms who does so much until the actual Three Kingdom period starts in 220, or depending on how you consider the beginning of the Three Kingdoms. So I really like him. There is such a gap between his usual villain figure and the result of his life work. Cao Cao never became the emperor. He never took over the throne himself. He probably thought about it. He got himself a lot of power, a lot of titles and ranks and all of this, but he never took the throne for himself. And just for this, I feel like it makes him a very, very interesting character. His son took over like basically 2 days after he was dead. He removed the emperor and started his own dynasty. But Cao Cao didn't. And in this way, he sometimes reminds me of Julius Caesar. You know, when Caesar tested the water with the when during his triumph he had a crown dropped on his head, and the people were like, "Ooh, no, we don't like this." So Caesar was like, "All right, not for me." So I think Cao Cao reminds me a lot of this, and he was definitely I believe he was the most talented warlord of his time, and I really don't like how easily he's been vilified. You know, it's too easy. There is no explanation. That's how he was. No, he grew into this, I believe. At least that's how I would like to describe him.
He's vilified because of the massacres. So I don't dispute he's the most talented of the warlords. Like, hands down, he's the most talented, and he does a lot of good. I think there are some fairly obvious reasons for why he is vilified.
I am not saying he was a good guy at all, and there are good reasons why he's been vilified. I'm just saying he was probably not like this from the beginning. It didn't happen all of a sudden. You know, he wasn't born like this, but when you read the romance or sometimes it does feel like it, like he was this cunning guy from the beginning.
That makes sense.
The romance introduction is, "This is a crafty, unreliable git. Look how he's tricking his uncle."
Exactly. Right. Look, some of the stories of him like trashing a wedding with Yuan Shao, you know, those are awful stories, right? It's like, no, he didn't do those things.
And you have the Lu Boche story right at the beginning, don't you?
Yeah, Lu Boche.
Yeah.
So that's one story I'm happy about. The way I went around it. I had quite a lot of fun with Lu Boche. Yeah. So yeah, Cao Cao, I really like him. I really wanted to dedicate the first 3 books to him as much as Liao Hua. So the first cycle is really about Cao Cao, but Sun Jian is a very interesting character. If he didn't die so fast, he would have become, I guess, maybe the greatest hero of his time. He was
other than his son, of course.
Well, we don't know if his son would have been so central. With in the shadow of his father, he might not have become the little conqueror, right? Now, this guy was absolutely everywhere. He came out from a very low background. You know, we don't know, like when they say he was the descendant of Sun Tzu, like, yeah, probably not, but he was probably the son of a merchant. I think like the Crespini says,
melon farmer is what the suggestion we've got recorded in 1 or 2 folklore stories.
All right, why not? So because of his charisma and bravery, he managed to do so much to put down rebellions all over the empire in a very short time. And I really think if someone wanted to write a what if story, Sun Jian would be the character to go to, like something that doesn't let him die. If he could survive this battle, the history of China would be very, very different. So yeah, quite like him.
And how about Liu Bei?
So for Liu Bei, I think I probably have been infected by the Crespini's views of Liu Bei, and he's the one I'm the most skeptical about. Now, the legend, the romance of the Three Kingdoms, but also everything happening that has been told before Luo Guanzhong has been overly kind with this man who, in the end, ended up betraying pretty much every ally he ever had. So, but at the same time, I think we mentioned it to when we spoke together, the three of us. He probably had a lot of very good qualities. Otherwise, he wouldn't have managed to keep so many talented people with him. So, like, it's easy to like him and it's easy to despise him because of this benevolent, overly benevolent attitude that he has been given. But like you said, I think Stephen, he never massacred as much as the others. So you know, a lot of good points for him there. And
I'm really interested to see how you portray him, because obviously you're not a big fan, but you've got to get this balance right between how he's writing history and making it clear he's not the benevolent person that Koei presents him in, while still making him a figure that people want to follow. So I'm really interested to see how you do that.
So because you know this book too, I really like the character of King Arthur in Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles, and this is a bit of the attitude I want. Someone who is struggling between wanting to do good and his own ambition, you know. And in the 2010 Three Kingdoms TV show, there is this beautiful scene where Liu Bei tells Pantong that he really wants to conquer Shu. He wants this land for himself. He wants Yu province, but that would be betraying his kin. And he can't do this. He can't be the bad guy because that's not his way. And he hates himself for it. He's like, while other lords, they have it easy. You know, they don't care about being seen as bad. Liu Bei needs to protect his image of kindness, of benevolence and rightfulness. And this scene is really the Liu Bei I want to bring forth, is this guy who has ambition more and more as it goes. And at the same time, the only reason he succeeds is because of his image as a good man. So he can't, basically in a video game, he would have a difficult level from the beginning, you know, like this handicap. I need to remain good while achieving amazing stuff. So I don't despise him at all. I'm not as far as the Crespini's opinion. I don't go as far, but I'm also not as, how to say this, he is not as, I wouldn't imagine Liu Bei as good as he's been depicted over and over again.
That sounds like a really interesting version of the character. I really look forward to reading that.
So something I picked up on in the conversation about leaders is sort of like you mentioned sort of that Cao Cao's not the brutal figure at the start that he becomes. Liu Bei's ambition grows. I think sometimes when discussing history, there is a very, very danger of sort of like you take the end person they were at the end, and so it becomes, and people make them at the start. So yeah, Liu Bei at the end, highly ambitious. He became an emperor. I don't think he was very modest when he was doing that, but that's not necessarily the Liu Bei who who's sort of rising up against the Turbans, who's become a sort of mercenary general. And I think sort of sometimes with history, what's interesting is actually the journey from A to B with all the bits in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm assuming he was always ambitious, but for his standing at the time, you know, like at first he no one. So what can I do? Oh, maybe I can become a magistrate. Oh, that would be amazing. Then he becomes a magistrate. So I was like, maybe I can become an administrator. Wow, I became an administrator, and so on. You know, it's like, but if you ask him from the beginning, hey, would you like to be the emperor of like a third of the empire someday? It was like, come on, man, come to this. So no, he has to grow into this, and the higher he gets, the more he wants, and the more difficult it becomes for him to remain good. So that's a very, very interesting character. I'm just a bit more skeptical than about his regular image. Yeah.
Phase 2 of the novel is the sort of coming of age story, and so not just Liu Hua, but sort of several figures we will come across again are growing up and being educated or being teachers themselves. Was this a coming of age of future heroes and villains always an angle that interested you?
Yes, I really wanted to introduce a lot of young characters. First, because they were young. You know, we are used to characters from the Three Kingdoms starting as officers, and some of them maybe in my stories are the same, but most of them would have been kids at some point, right? So I wanted to introduce those characters as young people or as young teachers, young officers as well. Like at the beginning of the story, a character like Cao Ren is like 17, 18 in reality too. So it's important to introduce them at those ages as well. It's also a very good way for me to show the evolution of the main character by how the others evolve around him. Like some of those characters, you know, they turn a bit evil. So how does Liao Hua, how will he react to them turning into more evil characters? Will he protect them? Will he go away from them? So you learn a lot from the main character by the way he reacts to the others, the other characters' evolution. Also, those characters, those young characters I introduce from the beginning of the story as kids, they are a bit like stones on the board of Go. You know, some of them they are to be used later, like we mentioned Semayi. I drop them here and they'll be like, they'll be useful later. And others are useful right away from book 1, book 2, and they will help Liao Hua's development. There is one character among all those young characters that really surprised me a lot. Even myself as the writer is Man Chong. So he's a character that I really wanted to introduce because, well, what he did in his life is pretty interesting. But I'm really looking forward to see how readers react to his particular evolution within the first 3 books, especially because he's a friend of Liao Hua at the beginning.
I can see that being a very interesting development.
Yeah, Man Chong is going to be, he has some backstory that is quite interesting, and his evolution process is, I'm really happy about it. Yeah.
So Man Chong is, what's an interesting figure, isn't necessarily the most significant person in the Three Kingdoms. So how did you decide which figures you were going to include and which ones you were going to leave out?
Well, first they have to be related to Liao Hua one way or another at some point or on another point of the story. As such, for example, I don't really introduce the members of Yuan Shao's court, which is too bad because a lot of them are very interesting. But like I said, I won't put Liao Hua into Cao Cao's conquest of the north, so I didn't really go into the Guotu, Tianfeng, and all of this. So those guys couldn't really show up. But I really wanted to give more importance to very minor, sometimes fictional characters, such as Du Yuan and Pei Yuanshao. They didn't exist, they just appeared in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. But because they have such an impact on the life of Liao Hua, I wanted to introduce them from the beginning. They are very minors, but they become important in this series because of their connection
they're
to Liao Hua.
important to him. They may not be
Exactly.
sort of in the, if you're doing a massive overview of the era, they're very minor, but what matters to a person would be very different.
Yeah, exactly. And even within the staff of Cao Wei in general, a lot of them, you know, they have more of a impact on the war, on the battles between Cao Wei and the Sun Wu side of China. I didn't really introduce them because then they don't have anything to do with Liao Hua. So I introduced a lot of characters that will have an impact in the life of Liao Hua or in the battle between Cao Wei and Shu Han.
Yes,
now,
another adaptation where Wu are getting neglected.
No, I promise. If you know what, if this series work well, there will be another one just for Sun Quan, and I will make Sun Tzu the greatest hero of all time. All right, Stephen.
Right, I'm pulling your leg.
Me too. I won't do this. But
what's that?
No,
You didn't exist. I won't be in any of the novels at all. Is that what you're saying?
So, and now also I created a bunch of characters, such as the folks of Fajiapo, so the original village of Liao Hua in my story. And there will be more characters that I created, of course, and those are the ones I play with the most because, you know, they didn't exist, so I can do what I want. Now, I also had to sacrifice some characters in order to ease the reading experience, especially for people who are not familiar with Chinese culture and the Three Kingdoms in general. So if characters have names that tend to look the same, and if there are some redundancy, well, it kind of forced my hand. So that's why we won't see Shunyo, so the cousin / nephew of Shunyu, because yeah, their names are pretty much the same. Their role is pretty much the same, so I didn't include him. Now, I want to reassure some people, Eugene is not in book 1, while Yuejin is, but Eugene is going to be there from book 2. He's absolutely there. He's going to be quite important. I also like, just for the fun of it, I also like to bring some characters that I feel have been mistreated by history and the legend. Liao Hua is the obvious one, but I also give more spot to Cao Hong, who did a lot of things, but he's always being relegated to the rank of a bit of a brute. I don't like it. So Cao Hong has more importance, and characters like Yuejin as well. So that's how I decide.
Firstly, one of the characters I love to see, because he gets no cultural mention at all, was Song Yu, the calligrapher. I'm not going to
Zhong Yao, you mean?
Zhong Yao, sorry. Yeah,
Yep.
Zhong Yao, the calligrapher, because
Mm.
it was a good touch, the subject he has, but he's just not a figure you see so often. So when I saw him as one of the teachers, it was, yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like he would have been very much either liked or disliked by Cao Cao because he's a master of an art, right? And it's too bad that we don't see more of him. And in the future of Cao Cao's life, he's very important. So yeah, I wanted to introduce him.
Like, as a personal touch, I liked sort of Shushu's growth as you're already seeing him develop, because I mean, apart from Dynasty Warriors, where he's a bit of a joke, he kind of a bit of one-note character sometimes when people talk about him, and it's just kind of like you kind of see the gentle and the fierce side, and you also kind of see he's a young man growing, and that so I just really like that.
Had to go away from Dynasty Warriors, sluggish dude. You know,
it's so far away from his Romance of the Three Kingdoms portrayal, isn't it? Like, he's not that fat idiot in the romance. Like, yeah.
I think it's just because of his nickname, you know, like the Mad Tiger or Tiger Fool. And in some biographies, they explain like he could go from being quite placid to being extremely warrior-like in a split of a second. And because of this, people assume that he was mostly an idiot most of the time, and then could turn into a very good warrior then. I don't think that's true, right? But at the same time, it was good to bring this kind of quiet giant among the kids. Now he's going to develop a lot in book 2 and mostly book 3. I really like Shuchu. I wanted to give him a nice place in this story.
We touched on this earlier, but you do have a newsletter out, and you've also mentioned that you're doing little off-the-book chapters about characters that sort of smaller roles, or that they disappear out of Liu Hua's life, but obviously that's frustrating as a reader, but you get to see them again because of the
So yeah, this is something that I'm really excited about, is to write bonus chapters that are going to be from other characters' points of view or other characters' perspective. I will send those bonus chapters with my newsletter. So if anyone is interested, they just need to subscribe to my newsletter. They will receive it. If you missed some of the previous chapters like this, just let me know and I'll send them to you. No problem. For now, when there are like 10 of them.
You've already done that for me, so I'm grateful.
But so at first, those chapters are part of a series called Tales of the Three Kingdoms, and we will see what happens when Liao Hua leaves someone. So the first bonus chapter was about Han Zhong, so the Yellow Turban, one of the Yellow Turbans leaders, who stays in Jing province, and while Liao Hua moves on with the other Yellow Turbans. So we see from his eyes what happens to those Yellow Turbans who remained in Jing. So we get to know more about the battle itself, about Liao Hua's family, and some potential about the future for this series as well. So we get some hints of what's going to happen. So for now, I would like to write one chapter like this every 2 months. After book 2 is out, so in March, if everything goes well, I will start another series in parallel like this as a free bonus chapter. I can't tell too much now because I don't want to spoil it. I'm really excited about this, but there is going to be another story with other kinds of characters in the newsletters as well. Now, since we mentioned Fatling earlier, I will use him as an example because I think next bonus chapter, which will come out in January, will be from his point of view, and I will do a bit of a epistolar type of chapter. So this newsletter also allows me to play a bit with writing styles or points of views or these kind of things. So it's really just for me to have fun and give you more of the story outside of Liao Hua's life. So can I ask you, the two of you actually, which character from book 1 would you like to see in Tales of the Three Kingdoms?
I would actually say the one that I was immediately thinking of when I heard about the newsletter, you actually then did. So thanks for robbing me of the easy one.
It was an obvious one. Hanzhong was obvious.
We've kind of spoken about the fact that you mentioned that he was the great champion of the Yellow Turbans, but we didn't get to meet him face to face. If you were to go back in time and do a chapter about Bokai that was happening simultaneously to the novel, that would be something that would excite me.
So I'm actually thinking not from both sides' point of view, but from Liu Pi, who in my series was with both sides.
That's a good choice, actually.
That would be really good.
So it's one of my thoughts. Yeah. So I wanted to do at least 2 from the Yellow Turbans' point of view. There is no like a chronological order. I might do a little bit of everything I want here. And in the future, I want to possibly put those bonus chapters together to make a complete book by themselves. Yeah. So then they will be in the chronological order then, but for now I'm just having fun.
That sounds great. So you mentioned the
book.
book.
To do one with Dongzhou as the mighty and beloved hero of his story.
No, that's gonna be a tough sell. Now I do believe, you know what? I do believe Dongzhou did good for his followers, right? For his soldiers, he was probably a hero, but that's it. I think that he's really difficult to defend.
We will do a little bit of rehabilitation on this podcast later on, or at least I will attempt to, because I agree with you. Once he got to court, he did terrible things, but I do think his motivations for taking power may not be as negative as they are presented in history and in Curry, but we'll touch on that in a later episode. That's not for now.
Right.
So you mentioned that book 2 is coming out in March. What can we look forward to with that?
So book 2 is going to be full of action. It's going to be a lot more action than book 1 in many ways. There were a bit of action in book 1, but because the main character is a child, it's a bit difficult. It's mostly from a spectator point of view. Now, Liao Hua is going to be right in the center, right in the middle of the action. He's becoming a soldier and more, not just a soldier, but he's definitely becoming a soldier. And he's a teenager, basically, in book 2. So he's going to test the limits, as all good teenagers do. He's going to test the limits of what he can do, what he's allowed to do, what he's willing to do, and how to be an asset to Cao Cao. So his personality is going to get more fiery, more impetuous, and borderline insubordinate. So he turns into a really typical teenager, I want to say. But it's as much a novel about him than it is about Cao Cao. So we are going to see how the man rises through a lot of challenges, the solutions he will have to choose in order to get through those challenges. And Liao Hua has a very, I would say, surprising role in the rise of Cao Cao. And I think people will like it. People who are fond of the Three Kingdoms and knowledgeable will quite like the place Liao Hua has in Cao Cao's rise. Now, in terms of years, it spans over 6 years. So just like book 1, it's going to be from 190 to 196. So that gives you an idea of where it ends. And I was thinking how to make some comparison, and I would say that it has a bit of a Full Metal Jacket. So for those for the people who like that movie, there is this idea this atmosphere into it. There's a bit of Game of Thrones, a big pinch of The Last Kingdom, of course, and all of this in China, obviously.
Sounds amazing.
In any case, come say hi. Seriously, I love to talk to people who read my book or who want to read my book. So come say hi on Twitter or through my website, and some other Discord servers or whatever. I'm really excited to keep talking about it and to know what you thought of this book. And please leave a review. You cannot believe how much it helps when you leave reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you acquired the book.
Fantastic. So if you haven't yet got a copy of Yellow Sky Revolt, I really do urge you to go and pick one up, because it's fantastic. And hopefully, as you've listened today, you've become intrigued and you've already made the decision. So please do go and do that. But Baptiste, thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's been a pleasure to have you. And now it's time to say goodbye to our audience. So goodbye.
So thank you very much for having me around. That was very fun to talk about my book with you too.
It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you for every listeners. Bye.